Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have Kristen Gallagher joining us. Kristen, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. I'm so excited to be here.
So, Kristen, you've worked with companies like SurveyMonkey, AWS, is that Amazon Web Services, Elemental,
hmm
after their acquisition? Okay, Puppet, many other technology companies, really helping them with technical onboarding. Let's get into that first of all. So, for everyone listening who's wondering, well, what is technical onboarding? Just take us through. What does that actually mean?
Yeah. So when people think about onboarding, they most often think about sort of welcome to the company, culture, HR, getting your paperwork settled, benefits, things like that. But the reality is that what you really need is functional onboarding. So onboarding that is related to your job, your department, the area of the company that you're working in. And so for technical onboarding, we're really referring to software engineering, product management, DevOps, things like that. So technical onboarding that is really relevant to the technical organization.
Got it. And then how did you get into that? Because we've known each other for a little while now. And actually, at one of our, I guess, most recent client event in LA, you shared with me something I didn't know, which is that you have a background in art.
hmm
So how does someone with a background in art get into technical onboard? Just take us back to like the early days of how did you get into consulting and what were you doing kind of before that?
Yeah, yeah. So I feel like I should say I have a background in art history, and museum education, and so I have the way that my museum education, you know, degree went was basically a third business, a third museum and history, and a third kind of anything else I wanted. So anthropology, anything like that. And so I was definitely interested in education and adult learning, and so was really diving into the neuroscience of learning and how to apply that specifically for adults in non-traditional environments, so not classrooms. And that led me to working in museums. It led me to working in nonprofits, and eventually led me to working for a web development company and doing business development and writing proposals. And unfortunately, it was a great job, great experience, but a really toxic working environment. And I just knew I couldn't do it anymore. And I had really actually gotten to the point where I didn't think I could work for anybody else at the time either. And I had already started my business. I was using PTO and all of that sick time even to have meetings and try to figure out what the heck I was even doing with my company. And that was in the latter half of 2014. And then when I quit that job in the beginning of 2015, I really just started taking what I could get. And so people called me for succession planning. They called me for manager training, all kinds of different learning and development things. And eventually, some of my friends in the technology world here in Portland kind of told me, like, we're starting new jobs and the onboarding is just really bad and we don't understand what we're supposed to do. It's really frustrating. And we would just sort of talk through this over dinner or something. And I started to think, like, I think this is a problem that I could solve. And did a little Googling and a little
Yeah.
reading, and started pitching it. Honestly, I didn't have experience building onboarding programs 5 years ago, and just kind of tried to see who would buy it. And
Yeah.
I tried to leverage, the leadership development training that I had, conflict resolution, all of the sort of other skills. And turns out I was actually pretty good at it. And so over those years, probably the first 2 years, I was doing onboarding in all kinds of different capacities for all kinds of different companies. And then eventually narrowed into I just work for technology companies. And then after that, it was I just do technical and engineering onboarding.
Yeah, yeah, there's so much in what you just said that I want to unpack for everyone and kind of like really break it down. You start off mentioning that so you worked in this toxic environment where you an employee kind of recognized maybe this is not for me. I should be doing something on my own. Then slowly started to kind of venture in that direction. You mentioned that you just kind of started to take on opportunities that came to you, or tell us a little bit more about that. Like, were you going out and letting the world know that you're open for business, or how are you actually getting these initial clients and opportunities for your consulting business?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was taking breakfast, lunch, and dinner meetings at least 4 days a week while I had that job, and just buying a lot of coffees for people.
And how did you get those? Like, were you
Yeah, so
emailing people, calling people? How did you actually set that stuff up?
exactly. I was going on Twitter, LinkedIn. I was going to networking events and just getting cards. That's my lesson from 5 years ago: is never just give someone your card. You always get their card because they're never going to email you back. despite the great conversation that you had. And so I was just kind of meeting anybody in the sort of education, technology, business world. And truth be told, the first, probably few months of doing that, they weren't the right meetings to have, but I also didn't know what the meetings I should be having were. And so I was just kind of trying to like trip my way into figuring out who I should be meeting with and what kinds of companies would be interested in the kind of work that I could do. And eventually, when I started telling people, I would say in December of 2014 that I was quitting my job, somehow opportunities just started showing up. People would say like, oh, I need a facilitator for this workshop. Would 2,500 be okay for that? And I'm like, of course it would be okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know any better. And so, there was a little bit of, I hate to say like magical thinking, but I think when you put in the work to, for meeting people and just hustling for the first part of it and trying to get out there and tell people what you're doing, things do start to show up.
So it sounds like, and we see this a lot with clients and kind of talk about it quite a bit. It's like the idea of you're planting those seeds earlier on. You weren't necessarily seeing the fruits of your labors, right, or things sprouting just yet, but the roots were taking, kind of effect, or they were making their way into the ground. And then when you decide to make that leap, all of a sudden, all the work that you had put in earlier was actually start to kind of bear some fruit for you. Would you say that's kind of like how it felt?
Totally. I think it's also a good metaphor, to apply to the rest of your business. I mean, you can never, I think I know a lot of consultants who are just getting started and they feel like, oh, well, this is going to turn around in a week, right? I just had a great meeting with them. And it's like, that's probably going to turn around in 6 to 9 to 12 months. I hate to break it to you. And that was really tough for me to learn at the beginning too, right? Which was why it was so nice, honestly, to have kind of 6 months with a job to be doing these meetings. Now it's exhausting and it was, a lot of hard work, but it gave me that buffer so that things could actually mature.
Got it. Talk a little bit more about the sales cycle. So you just mentioned, I want to kind of get back to your path here, but you just mentioned something I think is really important for people, which is the expectations, right? Very often consultants go into meetings, they even put proposals to different clients, and they think, oh, like I've got this in the bag. This is business. I've just won. They're feeling all excited about it, and then the kind of inevitable happens, which is that it doesn't move forward, or there's a delay, or you think you've got it, but all of a sudden, oh no, you weren't talking to the right person, or Tom and Sue also need to take a look at this, and they're away for the next month. Like, what's your experience been with that? And then also, how do you now think about it? What's your mindset around those same situations since you've now been in the business for about 5 years?
Yeah, well, all of the things that you said have happened to me at least once, probably twice or three
Yeah.
times. Um, and yeah, I mean, I can just think of so many examples where I thought we were ready to go, and so I thought was being proactive, and had a proposal ready 2 days later. Um, and the reality is like this person doesn't make the decision, or I didn't ask the right pain point questions and I didn't get their budget right, or I wasn't actually solving the problem that they really had because I didn't ask the right questions to get at that problem. And so it didn't go through, right? And there's kind of a difference in, I think, like losing business versus the business not just being, it's not matured yet.
Hmm.
And I think that's something I've really learned to try to like sniff out over time, is that especially for my clients, the type of clients that I work with, they are acquiring companies, they're getting acquired, they're hiring a ton of people. And so it's not like an easy day in the office any day, right? It's constantly busy. They want what I have, but they actually don't really want to deal with it, right? And so I've had to learn how to make what I do as digestible and easy to understand and easy to buy as possible. And I think that's still a journey, right? I'm constantly learning. I mean, I'm working an opportunity right now that I've been working since May, and um, felt like a real surefire thing that was going to close in July. And that just doesn't always happen, right? New people join the team and suddenly we need another, director to review this proposal. And oh wait, we've got to meet with you again. And so my habit, I guess, has been to just not get too excited. You just don't count chickens. And then you have a pipeline, right? You're constantly putting things into your pipeline. I use HubSpot for my CRM. And really for me, having that visual, here's what's in kind of first conversation, here's what's in, conversations I've had in LinkedIn, here's what has been, I've been on the phone with them once, been on the phone with them twice, and watching that move through. I actually want to see a really heavy left end at the early side, or the early stages, because that means that I have more work to do to get them through. And so when I see it lopsided, that's when I get worried a little bit.
Right. So just for everyone that's kind of listening or watching, whatever it might be, we're talking about the pipeline here. So left is you're putting new people into your pipeline, right? On the right side would be someone that you've either engaged with and you have a deal that's done, or they've decided not to move forward, or you're nurturing them. So that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of the pipeline here. How about your expectations and thoughts around the importance of follow-up, right? Because you know that the type of work that you're doing has longer sales cycles. And of course, you're trying to push maybe a discovery offer or something to try and, get in there sooner. But sometimes it does take, like the example you mentioned in May. So we're now 5 months later, still has not yet closed. You have that business has not been won just yet, but that's the importance of follow-up. So what are you doing, or what are some best practices that you can maybe share around follow-up that you found to be helpful?
Yeah, I think this has definitely evolved for me over time. I can definitely say that calling people is something that moves things forward way faster. And that's something I got from you and Sam for sure. And actually, I try to mix up the kind of follow up that I do. So sometimes it's a call, sometimes it's an email. If I have, depending on the relationship I have, I might check in on that with them on LinkedIn or Twitter. It just really depends on the relationship and the sort of formality level with that potential client. And I try to not let more than like 7 to 8 days go by without checking in and seeing how things are. When somebody doesn't reply for quite some time, then I just leave it for a while. And then maybe a month later, I'll check in again. Eventually you just need to get stuff off of your table because you need to put new things in there.
Definitely. I mean, we talk a lot about this, right? The importance of making sure that you're following up with clients, but also that you're not neglecting bringing new people in. So it's a fine balance between the two of those. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, team building. A lot of consultants shy away from this idea of, building their team or adding new people. It's like something that they don't really want to do, but they feel like they need to, and they can't justify the cost in their mind. They see it as an expense, and they see it as money coming like out of their pocket instead of money going into their pocket. But I view your approach to this a little bit different. You've always been kind of very open to the idea, or at least since we've been working together, open to the idea of building your team and having team members. So just talk a little bit about like your experience of when did you first bring, so you're 5 years now into your consulting business, right? You've grown a nice business. Things are going well, always looking to improve. But like at what stage did you decide to actually add a team member, and what role did that person have?
Yeah. So I would say even in 2015, I was subcontracting parts of projects out to other consultants. And I wouldn't necessarily call that them being part of my team, but I was trying to get practice, kind of letting things go and delegating a little bit. And then in 2017, I hired my first sort of 10-hour a week dedicated person. And that was an admin job. It was scheduling because I was honestly getting so overwhelmed with requests and different things, both from a business development standpoint and a community kind of relationship management standpoint. And so that person did some scheduling. She also did operations stuff. She did invoicing, things like that. I certainly believe in hiring on sort of quasi team members like your lawyer and your accountant and your bookkeeper way early on. Even if you think you're pretty good at that stuff, just get it off your plate.
Definitely. Yeah, you should never be doing all that stuff yourself. Yeah, if you're spending time trying to figure out what to deduct and all that kind of stuff, you're definitely losing money because you don't have that expertise, but you're also losing money because you're spending time on that when you should be spending time on your business. What was the experience though like for you when you brought on that first kind of admin person to help you with all those things? Was that a hard process? Because still a lot of people don't want to give up that stuff. They feel that they need to hold on to it, and they're not getting that offer, delegating it early enough, but you did. What was the experience like for you? Was it really tough? Did you have to do a lot of training?
I did do a fair bit of training. it would be, I would be remiss to say if I didn't have an onboarding plan. So I did have an onboarding plan for her. And that onboarding plan basically was me in screen share videos explaining how to do certain processes. And sometimes it was like a voice recording of me in my car explaining this is what actually needs to happen. And then I would ask her to formalize those into standard operating procedures, which made it easier for later on down the road, in 2018, when I hired a full-time employee, and then more contractors after that, that 10-hour-a-week person had made those things into sort of standard procedures. The other thing that made it easier for me, at the time I was using a tool called Asana. We don't use that anymore, but just being really clear about expectations and saying, this is when something needs to be done, this is the sort of level of success, or this is what success looks like. So these are the objectives. I'll be honest, there were things that I didn't think about that tripped me up a little bit. So as an example, I send out or I prepare client onboarding kits for when we go on site to a client. So it's a little halfway gift, halfway sort of tool that they need to use in the project. And it's just a way to welcome our clients into, working with us.
Right.
And sometimes if we're working with clients, outside of the Portland area, we've got to mail them before we get there. And this person, my 10-hour-a-week admin person, was frustrated because she couldn't find the addresses of our clients. And I was frustrated because there were at least 3 places you could have found the addresses. 1 is Google, 2 is QuickBooks, and 3 was the contract. And she didn't think to go look in any of those places. She just asked me a couple of times. And that was I say it tripped me up, because I was like, okay, you need to think about this, right? Like, think about where this is. And that's where I sort of started to realize that that's not necessarily anybody's fault, but some people are more entrepreneurial and some people are going to take more or be a little more self-motivated and like think, okay, well, what little rabbit holes can I look at before I go ask my boss this? And that actually adjusted the way that I hired. So in the future, I kind of took that experience and changed the language a little bit and kind of said, I need people who will basically try to figure out the problem first and then come to me, right?
So Leslie, I talk a little bit about that because you've not only gone through the hiring process multiple times within your company, you've also been a part of, a lot of other organizations that are bringing on a lot of people. I think, in one instance, you were part of like the whole onboarding and transition of 200 people coming on in a pretty short period of time into an organization or after an acquisition. What are some of the best practices that you've seen or things that you look for, or just that you even counsel your clients on when it comes to hiring? And I'm thinking, especially through the lens of, another consulting business owner who wants to add, whether it's an admin person or a salesperson or another consultant. What are maybe some things that you just think about, like, these are definitely important to be thinking about?
Yeah. So I'll start first, in even the search phase, right? And I think what can happen with consultants, I see this time after time, is they know someone, right? They have like a friend or a friend of a friend. And that's just not always, it's not outright, going to be the worst thing that you ever do, but it's not always the best choice, right? Because you have sort of rose-colored glasses on, and you're not able to be as objective about their skill set. Number 2 is always make sure that you have a job description, and that takes time to develop. But I tell people, if you don't have time to develop the job description, you do not have time to onboard somebody, and that means that you're going to pay them, and they're not going to be working, as much as you actually need them to. People don't realize that you pay somebody at the 100% level, and they usually work at the 70 to 60% level, right? So there's this buffer time where they're logging into their computer and they're doing all these random things. And if you haven't, illuminated what the job actually is, then that 60 to 70% is going to go down to like 40 or 50%. So you're paying a premium when you really don't need to.
Is there a way, just want to jump in for a second, is there a way to actually get someone to go from that 60 or 70% to the 100%?
I think so. I mean, I think I've done it in my team, or I learned how to do it over time.
Yeah. So how do you do that for someone who's going like, yeah, I have other team members and I don't know if I'm getting the full, kind of highest level of performance out of them. What should they be thinking about or looking at in that situation?
Yeah. So I look at calibrating your expectations of how long something should take to how much time it actually does take the person that you hired. And most business owners, most consultants, you're going to work very quickly. And that's one of the things that makes you good at what you do. And you think quickly as well. And so you have to realize that that's not always going to be the case. With the team members that you have, because they're not business owners, right? And so it's not a judgment, it's just a different way of thinking and being. So you have to calibrate your expectations to what is reality. And then you have to do performance management. You have to coach. So don't come to your team member, whether it's a contractor or a full-time person, and say, well, you're not doing this right, if you have never talked them through what the process actually is and what your expectations are. So going back to that expectations of success, really explaining what the objectives are and what do I hope to achieve out of this, and why do I need this to happen the way that it needs to happen. Because this person, you might give them a task and they don't understand the context of where that task sits in the business, right? So outsourcing, as an example, I have a marketing team member I've had for about a year, and she does all of my social media. She actually writes blog posts. She transcribes, videos that I write and writes blog posts from that, or videos I do. And, I remember early on, I don't think she really understood like the importance of the video, and that it needed to get posted at a certain time every week, because I didn't explain that to her, right? But it did need to get done, because the professionals in my network who are looking at LinkedIn at a certain time, in order for me to show up in their feed, I needed to do it at a certain time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I realized she was posting things at like 7 p.m. Eastern time, we had to have a conversation about that, right?
Yeah.
But that's not her fault. I didn't tell her that anywhere in the job description.
Yeah, I think this is a really good point, because regardless, as you mentioned, whether it's a full-time person or part-time or contractor, right, as business owners, the responsibility always is on us, and our expectations often of other people are just expectations, but if we haven't communicated them, then we can't, hope that someone, or believe that someone's going to actually act without that. So the communication part is so important. The other thing I know that you're really big on is systems, processes. We had a conversation about that, I remember, at the LA event, and it made a few of us laugh, just kind of hearing about Kristen's approach to all this, and how, just well structured it was. But I think it would be interesting just to have you share maybe what are your go-to systems or processes that you use on a daily or regular basis that you think maybe could benefit others as well in their own consulting businesses.
Yeah. So referencing the thing that made everyone laugh, I do have a pretty specific color coded calendar. And I have found, for me, it makes my life a lot easier to block time. And so there's really not a lot of white on my calendar, and that's by design, so that I know what I'm doing throughout the day. The other system is kind of old school, but I write my agenda for the next day in paper. I have a planner that I actually write out, what are tomorrow's top 3 tasks,
Yeah.
the agenda for tomorrow. So I do that the night before, like as I'm closing up work. And that is a huge part of my system and my process, is just knowing what it is that I'm going to do tomorrow. The other systems, like I mentioned, I've used Asana. We use Quip now for our team. We also use Slack. And I think, a small team can really struggle with, well, where does something go? Is it in Google Docs? Is it in Dropbox? Is it, Microsoft Word? So we have very specific rules for what goes in what kind of system. So I don't think it really matters what tool you use per se. You just need a reason that you use this tool. So for example, for us, Quip is for all of our internal documentation about clients. It's for our notes. It's for kind of what's happening in the project, and the actual deliverables live in Google Drive, because we can share that with our clients, just as an example.
Got it. And then talk a little bit more about your calendar and like the color coding. The colors, I'm just interested to have you kind of explain that for everyone, but I'm also interested just to dive into the blank space that you mentioned, right? Not leaving that. Why is that so important to you, and what do you mean specifically about not having kind of that blank or white space?
Yeah. So every year, toward November, usually it's in November, I have a strategic planning retreat with my business accountability partner. We've been doing that. This year will be our 5th year actually. And we make model calendars for the next year. And a model calendar is basically how I would like to spend my time in the business. And it's the ideal that, if I don't want to start work until 9 a.m. and I want to end at 5 p.m., and I want an hour and a half lunch and I want to go to the gym. Okay, well, that really only leaves like 6 hours a day. So what do I do in those 6 hours? So that's the sort of philosophy behind it. And then in actuality, I give every client a color. And I typically am not working with more than 5 or 6 clients at a time. So it's not overwhelming. So I know, oh, I see orange, that means such and such a client. And so my mind is just primed to know what I'm going to be working on, even without looking at the actual item. Right. And then I have a specific color for anything that is internal business work, right? So if I'm meeting with my team, it's all teal. If I'm, my CEO day on Monday, that's another key component of my schedule here, my system is Mondays are CEO days. And I might have coaching calls on Monday. I might have, for my, with my business coach, I might have, accountability calls with my accountability partner, all of that stuff. But clients don't get to be on Mondays unless it's like an extreme emergency, which hasn't happened for a long time. Right. And so that color coding just allows me to see, what, just at a glance, okay, I think I have a couple things here. And the other thing that I've gotten better at over time, and I think continue to improve on, is I think about gear shifting. So how many times a day do I have to shift my mind into a different gear? I don't really like shifting into too many gears, right? So if I look and I see 4 different colors on a day, or 5 or 6 different colors, like something is wrong with my calendar, right? And I've decided, I don't have anybody who does my scheduling anymore. I've decided to use other tools like Schedule Ones to manage some of that. But sometimes I'm not that great at managing my calendar, right? And when I see those colors, I know I need to change something or reschedule or kind of back off the way that I'm doing something.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of what you said there really resonates. I do the same thing. I'm in the office right now. And when I leave the office, like before I leave each evening or in the afternoon, I make sure to have on the table behind, there's a pad of like a booklet, and that's my kind of to-do list for the next day. And even though I have everything in Google Calendar, which means that it's on my phone, it's on the different devices in the office or outside the office, I still like to write a written list. And that way, when I'm working each day, I'm able to cross it off. It's not, for me, it's something, it's important to have both of those. And the other thing that I do, which I think is very similar, is I prioritize. So when I have my list, it's not just, okay, here's what needs to happen today. It's here's the order these things need to happen in. And I think it's really important for everyone listening, like just as a question for you right now listening, how are you approaching your schedule? Because very often what we see with clients who, come into our coaching programs or we have conversations with is, if they're not really getting the results they want, often it's because they're not working on the right things. And so if you're not managing your time, and if you're not maybe spending enough time on your business or marketing because you're just too busy doing delivery, or you're too busy kind of working on a whole bunch of things that aren't necessarily that critical for the real progress in your business, then taking control in the way that Kristen is suggesting, even if you don't use all the colors of the rainbow, right? But just being able to take control of your calendar and kind of how you prioritize it can really make a big difference. It's why some people, because we all have the same amount of time in any given day, but some people are able to be significantly more productive while others, kind of struggle and feel like they're not making that progress. So I think that's a really big, good piece of advice for people. Let's talk about onboarding for a moment here. For a consultant listening right now, who might either be an independent solo consultant or a small, let's say, firm owner with 5 or 10 employees, something along those lines, where can onboarding help them? Like, what are some of the best practices or ideas of onboarding that they could actually use with clients? And maybe let's just make it very specific. When a consultant engages with a new client, what are some best practices that they can implement that can help them to start off that project more successfully?
Yeah, I think this is the cool thing about onboarding is you can use the same principles for your employees as you can for your clients, right? And so I think about sort of what is the arc of our relationship as client and consultant, and what are the expectations, the norms, how do I want them to interact with me? And so we have usually a kickoff event or meeting, and sometimes that's in person, sometimes it's not. Like I said, we have our welcome gifts, things like that. And we actually go through, okay, let's make sure we're all clear on what the scope of work is. So we go through that. We talk about the big goals and the outcomes of the project. We get any kind of changes, like if people are concerned about something and they've got questions. And then we actually talk about norms and communication norms. So I tell them, these are the times that I answer emails. These are the times that we can be on calls. I have basically an SLA, like a service level agreement. This is how quickly I'm going to respond to something. And we talk about, if you should need to pause the project, here's the the way that works, the process for that. So we start to talk about all of that. And what I think is critical to remember is, and this is going to be the same for any employee, people never remember what you tell them on the first day, right? And so you've got to kind of work through continually onboarding people and your clients over time. So I think of onboarding new clients as a way to show expertise, and care for my client too, right? I want this to be a really good experience for them. I want them to enjoy working with me. And enjoying working with someone means that they know what to expect from you, and they
Yeah.
know how you're going to interact with them.
I think that's such good advice, because it's so true. Like, if I think a lot of the things that you just described are things that maybe people like consultants think about and then they expect, but they don't actually communicate to their clients. And what I'm hearing you say here that I think is a big lesson is that communication is verbal, but it's also written. Like, you have this stuff documented, and that's really what separates someone who has a good structure, a good process, right, a good system in place, and someone that doesn't. If you're just only communicating verbally, it's very easy for someone to be thinking about something else when you're speaking to them. And as you said, right, we all don't necessarily remember everything that we hear, right? Most of it we don't, but being able to have some documentation or a process that puts those expectations that are written, defined consistently in front of the client, make sure that everyone's on board. And I was just thinking when you were talking, like, I was this last weekend, I went away with we took my mom and my kids and wife, and we went to a nice little resort by a beautiful lake. And I was thinking about, like, when you check in at hotels, right? It would be the same as, like, if you checked in and someone said, "Hey, here, yeah, thank you, here's your key," and just kind of like let you go off. And the experience that you get at a nice place where they tell you, "Oh yeah, at 4 o'clock there's going to be cookies and coffee and tea over here. Down the hall you can enter the pools over here." Like, they really, they show you on a map. Like, it's very specific. They tell you all the information. You feel much better about that experience. You get a lot more value from it. And it's just like, it's a much more pleasant, and I think also more effective way of doing things. And so it's kind of like there's parallels to that, that image or that kind of experience or story to consulting. So that's really good. Anything else that stands out to you? Like, any other specific, like, do you use any other tools, or do you drip emails, or do you schedule certain calls? Like, what else might you offer, or might kind of you see as being an important best practice for people to implement?
Yeah. So we do try to schedule everything out in advance as much as
Mm.
possible. So this is the check-in for this month, next month, et cetera. Almost all of our bigger clients that are multi-month projects, we have a weekly 20-minute stand-up, which is designed to just say, here's the blocker, here's what I need you to move, here's the status of the project, because that's us trying to really know and understand our clients. They don't, and I say this with as much respect for my own business as possible, they actually don't care about onboarding, right? They just want the pain point solved. And the pain point for them is actually, my team isn't getting up to productivity fast enough, or they're leaving too soon and it's too expensive for me, or it's friction on the team that I don't want. So the way in which we solve that problem does not matter to them, right?
Yeah.
And so we need to be as frictionless as possible. So if that means I only show up on their calendar once a week for 20 minutes and in 2 emails, then that's the best case scenario for them, right? And that has worked for the last 4.5, the years I've been doing technical onboarding, right? So I think that's not a specific tool, but that's a process. And I think constantly checking in with your client, not constantly, but every now and then, and just seeing how are you doing with this project? How are you feeling? Because people don't always tell you what's going on, and
Yeah.
sometimes you're going off in the other direction when they wanted you to go here. And sometimes people want something that's outside of the scope of work, and they don't always communicate that either, right? And that can really affect the way that they like working with you, or the sort of outcome of the project. I've definitely learned from projects where I did everything to a T and sometimes over the scope of work,
Mhm.
and the client still was sort of concerned or frustrated about something or a component of that project, because we did not check on expectations. We didn't calibrate as constantly as we needed to.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful advice. Actually, I was speaking to 2 clients in the coaching program this week who felt like they weren't, like, they maybe could have done things even just more efficiently, like in projects with clients. And what we're able to kind of draw the kind of the core reason back to is that they didn't implement those kind of clear set of expectations and the engagement path or the project path in the way that you just kind of suggested, right? And so I see that as being so important for consultants. If you want to avoid scope creep, if you want to avoid misunderstandings, if you want to be able to deliver projects profitably, right, like on time, on schedule, and have also a really good experience for clients, and everything that Kristen is sharing here today is super, super important. So two more important questions here for you, Kristen. Number one is, when you think about kind of like everything that you've learned and implemented over the last year or so, what would you say has been kind of like had the biggest impact for you on your business?
Gosh, there's there's more than one for sure. I
Anything that
think,
comes to mind, like top of mind stuff.
yeah. There was there was a pretty huge shift for me in pricing and realizing that I was seriously underpricing at the end of, 2018, and getting some advice from you and from other members of the group, and really sort of trying to separate my own issues or concerns with that pricing or that number from what the market's actually asking for and will bear. So that was a pretty huge shift and something that I've learned, and learned how to just speak more confidently about that because I tie it better to the ROI. So that's a pretty huge one. I think another big one, I think many people are familiar with the 80/20 concept, but just really trying to nail down how that shows up in my business and how I'm actually using that. And that's, I've always been somebody who kind of is like, okay, what's the minimum viable product that I can get out into the market and figure out, what the feedback is. But I definitely have found myself overworking or over indexing on a component of my business that really doesn't matter, right? And so just getting it to 80% sometimes is all I need to do.
Yeah, those, I mean, really good points. I think very common ones, like as opportunities for people to improve, right? So when we talk about 80/20, right, one thing is that, and kind of like what you mentioned, Kristen, you could take a project 80% to deliver for a client, and then people are spending a lot of additional time to complete that last 20%. But if the 80% is enough, then you don't need to spend the extra 20% of time, because probably that 20% is actually a lot more than 20% of time, right, to deliver like that full outcome. Because clients don't always need the 100%. If what you're delivering aligns like at 80% or even 70% with the results they want, then you don't need to spend extra time. But the other part of 80/20 is the identification of like, what is the 20% or so of, like, could be 30%, could be 15% of things that you can do. They're going to have the 80% impact, right? Or the greater impact. And that's always a good exercise for people to go through, to look at how are you currently spending your time right now, and what are the things that you could do that maybe they're the minority. You might have a list of 15 different things. I actually just spoke to a client yesterday, had like 15 different things. He posted into the forum, 15 different things or something like that. And then we jumped on a call and we were able to narrow it down to 3 things, only 3 things that he needs to do that are going to actually have exponential benefit for his business. And that's applicable to all of us. And the interesting thing about 80/20 is it doesn't apply just to business, right? It applies to life and relationships. And oftentimes we find that we spend time with people that maybe we don't enjoy the most, or the people that we enjoy spending time with the most, we're actually not spending as much time as we could be. And so interesting applications of all this. Kristen, I want to thank you so much for coming on here today, sharing a bit of your journey and experiences and best practices. I want to make sure that people can learn more about you and your work. So just tell everyone, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been great. So if you want to learn more about Edify, you can go to edifyedu.com, or you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. And I would love to talk to anybody.
Awesome. So we're going to have all that linked up in the show notes. You can just go to consultingsuccess.com, type in Kristen Gallagher, or even Kristen, Kristen. You'll find that right away, and then you'll see full show notes, transcript, and then links to Kristen's website, as well as her LinkedIn profile. Kristen's amazing what she does. Highly recommend that you reach out. And if you decide to, just let her know what you found most valuable or beneficial from this conversation. And if you have any questions, reach out to us as well. We're always happy to help. All right, Kristen, thanks again so much.
Thanks, Michael.